Well, tonight on the program, this is our focus. Now, nearly 700 Kenyans have applied for the 4 vacancies of IEBC Commissioner. For what is generally regarded as arguably one of the toughest jobs in Kenya, the number of applicants surely must be flattering. That notwithstanding, the country's next general election is just over a year away. And just a moment, there's also talk of a national referendum in between. So with the known and the unknowns, how best should the IEBC prepare for the task ahead? Now, joining me for this discussion this evening are guests who've seen it, they've done it, and it's a night of former vice chairpersons of the electoral body. Joining me in studio is Lilian Mahirizaja. She was former vice chair of the IEBC. And joining us from Kakamega is Gabriel Mukele. He's a former vice chairman of the Electoral Commission of Kenya, ECK. I actually want to begin with one SMS and a tweet. The SMS is from Jomo Gigi from Okorowene. He says, with such an overwhelming number of IEBC applicants, the question begging for answers is, are the applicants really committed to the core, to serve from the heart, or to serve for the heart? That's one tweet, that's one SMS there. And a tweet, Ascon Kamili says, seems like all Kenyans want to be IEBC commissioners. Speaks to 2 things. Either we really want to solve the persistent election problem, or we just want a chance to earn money and cut deals. I hope the former wins. Gabriel, let me start with you. I know you've been patiently waiting for this interview to start. I'm sure you saw the news, nearly 700 applicants seeking to fill those 4 slots. What should a person that is seeking for the job of a commissioner be like? What should their character be like? They say hindsight is 20/20. What can you tell us about the qualifications for that position, Gabriel?
There isn't any particular qualification I would say one should have. It is a job like you can be a judge of the High Court, you can be a surgeon in hospital. It is a job that anybody, even a scientist, can do if he's qualified enough to do. I saw the list, and these are about 700 people, as you have rightly said. But Kenya has many people, and now, from what I see, a lot of young people are educated, properly educated, double graduates, and they can do the job. But I was also wondering, actually, when I read in the papers today, whether those in charge could simply shortlist 10, 20 people instead of 700, taking 2-3 days to interview people. I didn't see the real reason for that, although it would be difficult because many of them are properly educated, and anybody with a degree in whatever field, if he comes to the Electoral Commission, he gets to learn the law quickly, and he can be able to do it. Gabriel, I don't think I would really say it must be a special qualification. I don't think so. Maybe
my question should have been a bit more specific. Maybe it's less about qualifications and more about character. It seems like a job that requires great bravery, sacrifice, integrity to the utmost. Sometimes you put your life on the line, the life of those who you love as well. At least that's what it sounds like. You don't think those are characteristics that should determine who the next commissioner is?
It is all that. You have summarized it yourself quite well.
But you are my guest.
You take a job where you are serving the country, you are serving people, and where there is rivalry.
Okay, we apologize for that technical hit. We'll carry on with discussing with him as soon as we get him back on. But Lilian is here with us. And Lilian, when those interviews commence, in your view, what should the selection panel be looking for? With the kind of election that you can estimate we would have next year, technology to play, and so forth.
Thank you, first of all, Wahiga, for having me here. And I think even just going back a little bit to the question you've asked about qualifications, it's important for somebody other than just the experiences, expertise, that, you know, somebody needs to be qualified for the job. And the other elements that you talked about, integrity of a person, commitment. It's a selfless job. It's service you're giving to the country. And I must say, it's a great honor for anybody to sit in that commission, to serve where you're really entrusted with sieving through all the processes of elections and getting the proper or good leaders for our country, to run our country. It's not an easy job. So I think starting from there, I would say that yes, you must be qualified, but you must also be a person of integrity. So I would expect that selection panel, yeah, other than the qualifications, because remember they will go through the list and look at what the law says. Do you have the qualifications? Do you have the experience? Do you have the expertise? The skill sets that have been put there, the qualifications. Then from there they shortlist. But again, looking at the numbers, you know, we are talking of almost 700, and you have to shortlist for 4 positions. It's going to be an uphill task.
Did that number surprise you when you compare with your time and when you applied for that position?
Not really much, because I remember in my time, that was 2011, we had over 400, close to 450 applicants. And that was for the position of commissioners, because the chairperson was a separate application. So we were about 450, and they shortlisted about 44 of us to be interviewed. So you can imagine, from 44, they scaled down to 13 of us. Then after 13 people, they came down to 8. And plus chairman, we were 9. So really, I wasn't surprised when I saw, you know, that they also had hit over 600. And this is just for the 4 commissioners.
Mike, okay. I want us to talk a little bit about how those commissioners actually get into office, because there's been a debate about how, for example, you are appointed and versus how other commissioners have been picked today and in previous commissions. What's your preference when you look at the IPPG model, where political parties nominate those who will sit within the commission, and the competitive selection model that we see today? Which one, in your view, works best?
I think the competitive model works best, because...
Why do you say that?
I say that because when we had the IPPG model, remember we had many commissioners, about 22 commissioners who were sitting with Gabriel Mukele in the ECK. And when things went wrong in 2007, Kriegler came in to investigate what went wrong with the processes. And one of the issues that they investigated was the process by which commissioners are picked. And remember, this is the time when things were just happening. There was a volatile political situation, very competitive, and we had 22 commissioners. One of the findings of Kriegler was that a lot of the commissioners did not draw the line between what they were doing, their work as commissioners, oversighting management, so they were crossing over and micromanaging management, really. So one of the recommendations of Kriegler was to have a lean commission that is competitively recruited to come and manage elections. And that's what happened with our commission. We were competitively recruited, and when we came in, it was just running and, you know, doing your job, knowing that you have an oversight role over the management. So all those mistakes that had happened with ECK, we tried to sort of avoid those pitfalls when we took office. But
Vice Chair, and you'll allow me to call you Vice Chair for the purposes of this interview, some of those titles don't quite rub off. There are political players who still feel that the competitive model has not worked for them. In fact, I don't know if we have that soundbite of Honorable Raila Odinga back in December 2020, where he said, even competitively, it is hard to find an angel in this country out of 50 million Kenyans that can be, you know, fully trusted to oversee something as sensitive as an election. And he felt IPPG model, at least everybody knows what's on the table, everybody knows what each commissioner stands for, and thus for them that's a better system for which to get commissioners into office.
It may sound attractive, it really may sound attractive, but remember, politicians play politics and they contest for elections, they contest for the seats. But in the Electoral Commission, you are supposed to conduct elections. So you must divorce yourself from being the one again running around as a politician and again managing elections. So we must have a clear dichotomy between those two areas. You run elections, you are in the electoral body. You are a politician, you contest elections. So there has to be that difference. Otherwise, it will be a muddled up process and again the blame will be thrown here and there. There'll be a back and forth when things go wrong. And who do you blame? Who do you blame at the end of the day?
Okay, you've made your preference quite clear. You've mentioned Kriegler. We actually have some graphics of a few of the recommendations that came out of his report. I don't know if we're able to put those up. Some of the things that he said was, and one of them specifically that has been a big talking point in this country, is that electoral commissioners should be in place at least 24 months before the election. The Constitution of Kenya speaks about an election that will take place on the 9th of August 2022. Today is the 25th of May, 2021. We are almost 12 months to the next election, and we still don't have those slots filled. And I'm told we actually have Gabriel on the line. Okay, Gabriel, thanks for, sorry about that, and glad that we now have you back on the line. According to you, Gabriel, and according to the Constitution of Kenya, there should be an election on the 9th of August 2022. What stage of preparation, in your view, should the IEBC be at right now?
First of all, let me go back to the idea of appointment before elections. I was appointed in October 1992, and in December I was in Britain printing ballot papers. As a lawyer, of course, where you know where your law is, you can digest these things very quickly. But indeed, it is difficult for the public to look at the election, look at the referendum, and look at these other matters within that short time. But it is important that whoever is taking up the job, or whoever is in the chair, as my other colleague has said, you have got to get down. You are a judge, and you must judge, and you must organize and go to the field. You just don't have time for anything else. They must get in and get in as quickly as possible. But what I'm trying to say is that even with this short time, it can be done. Where there is a will, there is a way. Now, if circumstances are such that it must, people must do it, let the commissioners, whoever they are, or the numbers, get to work, and get to work very seriously. You must be honest. You are a judge in that position. You are an organizer. You have got to resolve conflict and all of those. So it can be done, although I feel the time is fairly short, especially when you look, maybe you are going to look into this later on. The judgment of the 5 judges is pending an appeal, and then it can go up to the Supreme Court. The new Chief Justice has assured us that she will do her best, but it can be very, very, very difficult. So it is a difficult situation, but I can repeat, it can be done.
Former Vice Chair, then tell me this, and I don't know how much you remember of the time when you were in office. In terms of timelines, we are in May 2021. The Constitution speaks of an election in August 2022. Depending on what happens at the courts, there could be a national referendum in between. What should the IEBC be doing right now to prepare for an August election?
The IEBC should work on the presumption that the election will go on. They don't have to wait for anything. They just go and put matters in a position, put everything in a position, and wait. If the court says, no, you can't go on, they can't go on. But otherwise, is to get to work, appoint the new commissioners are being appointed, and when the timelines come, then you have got to sit down and say the returning officers are in a position, coordinators are in a position. The situation at the moment is also different from our situation of 1992, 1997, 2002. It is different because we have permanent officers in the office of a coordinator. And it can be done. People can be interviewed for jobs and wait. They don't have to be interviewed and get to the job straight. So the idea is they must get in a position and proceed to prepare for the election. Okay. If it is postponed, fine. But otherwise, they must get down to working.
Okay, and to let our viewers know, some of the images that you're seeing on the screen is of some of the by-election incidents that we saw recently in Juja, and we'll be talking a bit about that with my guests. But for you, Lillian, on the back of that, the question of voter registration. Since the last election, thousands, possibly millions of Kenyans have crossed the 18-year, are now 18 and over. No registration has been ongoing. How long a period is adequate for one to do the voter registration, which is a requirement before the next election?
Wahiga, I know that the commission is mandated to carry out continuous voter registration. So we presume that continuous voter registration, if it was ongoing, it may have stopped at some point. But again, this is a main function of the commission as per Article 88 of the Constitution, that the commission will carry out continuous voter registration, and they will do voter registration until, I think the law is about 60 days to an election. That is when they will stop, so that the other processes for verification of the voters, register, certification is done, and then the election is done. So it is my presumption that they have been doing continuous registration, but otherwise they would not do in areas where there are by-elections. They cannot do voter registration in areas where there is by-election. So
if they have not been doing those exercises, if they've not been carrying them out, how much time then logically would one need to allocate for Kenyans who have turned 18 not to feel that they'll be marginalized from that next election?
They would have to do that in accordance with the law. If the law says 60 days before the election, you must have done, you must have certified your register, done all those verifications, then the commission should prepare themselves to do that. But otherwise, everything must be done in accordance with the Constitution and the law.
Okay, which is why I want you to help us, because I'm speaking to you as someone who sat on that seat. 9th August 2022, we have an election. Walk us back. What sort of steps do you envision would need to take place for that election to be free and fair, to comply with the Constitution? Off the top of your head, Vice Chair.
Yeah, to a large extent, I'll agree with what Mr. Mukele has said, my senior, that the commission should just proceed as if there is no court to stop them at the moment, that they will proceed with the processes of the elections. Right now, as you know, they have
even if that would not be in contravention, I apologize for interrupting you, but some would see that as being in contravention of the court orders. No,
I'm not saying they will disobey court orders. They will proceed to prepare and carry out their mandate as if, there was, they are looking at 2022. But in between, of course, they have already filed, as you know, which we are not going to go into. They filed their appeal on the ruling of the 13th of May. They've already filed that's not to say they will stop. But I'm saying in terms of preparing, there are all these pre-election processes that must go on. So as you know, they are carrying out by-elections. They have just done the last week, the Bonchari, the Juja, and Ruri by-elections, and there are the by-elections coming up. So they are continuing with their mandate as if, they're going to go on to the roadmap towards 2022. So towards 2022, they will ensure that the legal framework is good, that anything they need amended has to be done now. All the processes, all the regulations must be placed before Parliament so that they are passed, ready for them to be used, if there is anything to be passed by Parliament. And they have to make sure that they are going to, of course, prepare the roadmap towards the general election, and that includes all the resources they need. And of course, next month we'll be closing a financial year, and that means we are going into a new year. Any funds now they need for the general election of August 2022, they have to start planning in the new financial year. They are not going to wait until they cross over the other financial year. They'll have to start that from June, planning for the finances, the resources they need, capacity building for the staff. They'll have to plan that, all the training they require, and any recruitments they may need to do, they should have started that by now. Those are some of the pre-election processes that need to be done. And then later on, now they will, as they move towards the election, they will be looking at their voter register to see when they will, if they have not been doing continuous voter registration, they have to do all that. So that 60 days before the elections, they have to do the verification, place out the voters' registers, to all the counties for people to go and confirm their details. And of course, the voters' register must be certified before the general election. So then thereafter, they'll have to check their systems, their voting systems. Now they're using the MIM system. They have to check the results transmission system.
Like quite a process.
The IT. And now we don't know what will happen. As we say, the referendum might come in, and that again will put them on, they will stall on these other processes so that they focus on the referendum. And a referendum is as good as a general election. They have to prepare just like a general election.
Let's talk a little bit.
There's quite a lot to be done.
That is very clear, and my worry is about the timing. Remember, the Kriegler Commission spoke about 24 months. Now it makes sense why you need those 24 months. But let's talk a little bit about referendums. I think, Gabriel, you had a chance to oversee one back in 2005, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. What was that experience like, just in case those pushing for a referendum in this current dispensation have their way?
It was, I took a very active part in that one, and even when it came down to drafting the law, in fact, with all respect to the 10209, they are now trying at the moment to go back to what we had put out in 2005. Now, the referendum, as my learned friend has said, is just an election, because people have got to choose, if you remember, a banana and whatever it was during that year. You should have a clear register, well in place, so that people are not denied, and then people have got to be, the political parties or parties have got to take the sides into a referendum, and people go to vote for yes or no, whichever it may be. And then, of course, there has been a debate as to whether people should, like at the moment of this BBI thing, they should vote for the whole thing, or they are voting for particular issues. But people don't find it very easy. The ordinary Wanjiku and Anyango and Nafula, they don't find it easy to distinguish what people are talking about. So that's what I'm saying. The coordinators are in place. We have the county election officers. Get down to it and put everything in order. The court doesn't say, the court can tell you, you will not do that election, but it doesn't tell you, stop preparing for election. The court doesn't tell you that. And the court has not talked about stopping anybody from doing elections. They have said you cannot carry out the referendum of the BBI. But as I've said, the judiciary, if they have enough judges, they should now come up quickly and organize to make the Court of Appeal strong, so that this thing can go to the Court of Appeal within another 1 month or 2 months. We will know the results. And those who don't agree, they will go to the Supreme Court. And whatever is happening, you just do it to meet the circumstances of the day. We cannot just brush this thing aside and say, forget about it. No. So the Electoral Commission should get into the way and keep going as soon as possible. Vice Chair,
if you can still hear me, I know you say that a referendum is very similar to a general election, but some would ask, some assume that it's a much simpler process. It's a yes or no. It's not a sort of, printing numerous ballot papers with different candidates. It's not a very complex counting process as compared to a general election. So are you telling us this evening that it's not as much simpler to conduct and prepare for a referendum as it would be for a general election?
It would be wrong for me to say that it is what you are suggesting. But what I'm trying to say is that it is a choice. The people are going to make a choice. The other one, indeed, as you say, and I've printed ballot papers every election since 1992 up to 202. I was going to print ballot papers. It is very cumbersome, I agree. So in that sense, it is easier. It is easier for even the Electoral Commission and the process itself. But it must be done. And if it must be done, it is a choice. People have got to have a choice, and you will hear a lot of quarrels a lot of allegations, just like a general election. But for sure, let me agree with you, it is simpler.
It is similar. Let's put up the graphics there of the Kriegler report. This is just a summary. There's a lot more that was captured in that report. Quite some work that was carried out by Kriegler and his team. But nevertheless, we can put that up on the screen. I know that part of it had to do with making sure that the commissioners are in place 24 months before the general election. Oh, there we go. Electoral commissioners in place 24 months before the election. Integrated and secure tallying and data transmission system also must be in place. We have another graphic there. Secure simultaneous transmission. That must get to also the National Tallying Center, plus also the financial independence of the Kenyan Electoral Commission. But of course, a lot of this was then brought before the courts in 2017. Remember when the court annulled that election, talking about IEBC not being able to prove results from more than 11,000 polling stations, IEBC relying on interim reports by election observers to argue their case that elections were credible, etc. And I want us to talk a little bit about technology, and I want to start with you, Vice Chair Lillian. It was introduced substantively as the mode of transmission of results, but from that 2017 Supreme Court decision, the courts established that irregularities were still there and declared the results as null and void. Even as they did that, we know the courts were also not able to access the servers which were told were in France. Is technology, in your view, and this is to both of you, a solution, or is it still another opportunity to sink our electoral management into deeper trouble? Because the jury is out there on that, Lillian.
I think we must be positive on the use of technology, because this is the way to go. Technology was recommended as a way of bringing in efficiency and bringing in transparency and accountability in the electoral process. But again, technology comes with its challenges. If the systems are not regularly updated and you know, the transmission systems are not well, you know, the staff are not well trained in the use of technology, then those challenges of having errors here and there, because remember, they are being handled by human beings, and these human beings must be kept abreast of whatever technology we are deploying. So I think it's something that we need to learn, that technology cannot, yes, be per se the panacea for our problems, but we need to embrace technology in a way that will focus on making our elections more efficient and more credible because of where we've come from in the past.
Does technology reduce the number of the possible loopholes in an election? Can it? Or is it only as good as those who operate it? How much should we rely on that to ensure that elections are safe, free and fair?
It should be able to reduce all the loopholes, because remember what Kriegler found out, that, you know, there was a lot of ballot stuffing, vote buying, vote selling, you know, all these electoral malpractices that were happening. So the fact that you can use technology to cut out all these and, you know, human interferences, so to speak, then you'll be able to have a more conducive and more efficient process and cutting out all these electoral malpractices. However, you must train the staff so that they are up to date with technology, and that technology, the system, the transmission must be credible, it must be simple, it must be verifiable. All those parameters that we have in the Constitution really must be the key, the cornerstones of that system.
Vice Chair Mukele, I don't know if you hold the same view, and I don't know how much technology was used when you were at the Electoral Commission of Kenya.
We had just started in 1997 about bringing in technology. I'm sure my friend, my learned friend Lillian knows much better as far as the situation is concerned. But this is something that is now worldwide. You can't escape it. And as my learned friend has said, it is a question of who is operating. If you pass the wrong information, it's going to cause problems. Wrong information has been released through computers, or the returning officers do not have to go to the tallying center in a constituency. It is a matter of just putting information in and transmitting. That can bring problems. But otherwise, technology must be encouraged and people must get down to it, because now that is the order of the day. For some of us in the 1970s and 80s are known now, it is out. But for the current life and current activities anywhere, technology must be embraced.
Gabriel, on the same note, in Kenya, the problem seems to be that whether it's a manual system or an electronic one, voters come and vote, largely peaceful, go home and wait for the results. The issue seems to be the tallying of those votes. And of course, you remember that Maina Kiai case had appeared to clean up this whole matter when it was ruled that the polling station and the constituency is the final counting or tallying point. We believed, Kenyans largely believed, that the issues that have been seen in the past would be issues of the past. But it seems that the IEBC has not been successful when it comes to translating this to a conflict-free tallying process. Why do you think the tallying is always so contentious, Vice Chair Mukele?
Because that is where the results are. It used to be that the returning of the polling station goes to the returning officer's office with the results, and the counting is done there. And then it came now, the tallying at whatever center it is, until it goes to Nairobi when it's presidential and so on. So it is a question of honesty in whoever is carrying out the work. And also, it is a question of our believing in ourselves. It is not true that everybody who loses just alleges that there is fraud. Like Trump was saying in America, was shocked that even in America, which has been taking the lead and teaching us everything and preaching to us, somebody is standing up and a candidate and saying there was fraud at that level of all the places in America. So I repeat, it is a question of we cleaning ourselves, deciding that we will do the right thing. We should stop manipulation, and also when you lose, you should not be able to, you should not just be preaching that, oh, it is so and so, the government of the day that has done this. It can be practiced, and political parties can meet. After they have met, they decide on who will, before the information is transmitted. We should be able to say that 2, 3 people, or whoever are in the center before transmission, are able to look at the results and not just assuring of one person. But manipulation, that is something that we are saying it must be stopped if we want a peaceful election. Gabriel, and now the mood in Kenya is that we don't want problems after elections.
Gabriel, I really wish I held your optimistic view. You make it sound so simple. But for the few elections that I've covered, getting those 2 to 3 people that can be trusted by all has always proven to be the issue. And Lillian, let me also bring you in on this. What's your view on this? Voters wonder, we voted peacefully, many went home to wait for the results, and you end up sometimes waiting for hours, days to get the results of what you voted for, what you thought was a very simple process.
I think, Wahiga, you started off well when you said, you know, the voting is so peaceful. People vote and, you know, they are advised to go home and they hold their peace. But something goes wrong when the tallying starts and results starts streaming in. How come there are a few hooligans who hang around and, you know, you just find there's some chaotic scenes here and there? And how come now you're putting the blame on IEBC? It's not about what an IEBC official is doing. And I think I cannot lay...
Is that an honest assertion? The court in 2017 put the blame on IEBC?
Okay, they would talk about irregularities. And I think, Wahiga, you recall even during the US elections, the courts found there were some irregularities. A few irregularities which were not material to the results of the election. The same thing here, because these are human beings, people get tired, yes, but in terms of just people causing chaos, it does not come from the IEBC. IEBC does not cause chaos. IEBC would conduct the elections, they would receive the results, they would tally them, and they would announce. And at that point, when results are trickling in, sometimes when some candidates realize they are losing, And the expectations, of course, for everyone is that I'm a winner. I go in this to win. Then they start the chaos. This cannot surely be blamed on IEBC. We understand, of course, the little errors that we get here and there, just in tallying, sometimes in tallying. But now, by good luck, the tallying system, the transmission system is computerized. It's all IT. So the thing is, if you put in, you know, they say in the ICT language, if you put in garbage, you get garbage. But whatever you put in is what you expect to get at the end of the day. So I think there is also another element of just trusting that the electoral body is doing the right thing at the time of transmission of results and at the time of announcing the results.
Commissioners, I have one or two things I want us to talk about before we wrap up this interview. And these are conversations we'll continue to have because we as a country need to talk about elections with one looming next year. But we also want to hear what Kenyans have to say this evening on this topic. I've seen lots of questions coming in via 22422, our SMS line, and via Twitter as well. Via the SMS line, Philip Pokot says, we should count votes at polling stations only and transmit and transport or transmit the results once to tallying centers at constituency, county, and national centers as well. Kirimi Laibu says, voting, voting, voting. Kenya, you mess, you go home, period. Okay, that's another one there. Let me see. Sir Nixon Dugire from Kindaruma says, how should the IEBC execute its mandate in handling the issue of boundaries? Kimani from Juja has an interesting point. You say that continuous voter registration has been happening in IEBC offices in the constituencies. Visit any constituency office and you will witness that. Okay, Kimani, we will verify that. And someone says, if you want to reduce the number of applicants to the IEBC commissioner, the 4 vacancies, scale down the civil servants and politicians. Okay, I don't know if that is fair. Let's look at what people are saying on Twitter. These are some of your thoughts. All right, Okelu Mwalimu says, wait until you see politicians, foot soldiers, and sympathizers appointed to serve as IEBC commissioners. That's when you realize that Kenya may never get anywhere near free and fair elections. Okay, that's a comment there from Okelo. Let's see. E. Onditi, you say IEBC have a big task to restore faith and trust within Kenyans. Wanjiko doesn't trust servers, Form 34s, poll station electoral officers. The biggest task is to restore confidence. Okay, interesting view there. What else do we have? Gatete Nduati says, if fairness of an election is all about having no illegalities, then we will have to toil for decades. All right. Quite some views there. Ole Carrington, you say that Kenya embraced a multi-party democratic system in 1992, and the country has held 6 presidential elections since. It's only in 2002 that the losing side accepted the vote count. IEBC has a record of not being transparent. Ole Carrington, okay, I don't know how he bases that, bearing in mind there was only one election that was overturned, but fair view there. P.S. George Odhiambo says, there is nothing like electoral justice in the country. It will never happen. We are below par when it comes to achieving that. Election clauses in the constitution is wrongly structured. We can't elect 6 leaders at a go credibly. George has raised an interesting point there in his last question, which I will ask my panelists. Carter Pewter says, I fail to understand why we can't prepare for an election in, say, 3 months. It's just printing ballot papers with serial numbers, provide security, counting them, announcing winners, issuing winner certificates. What's so difficult? IEBC Kenya. And I can see some laughter from my guests here. I don't know where we want to begin because I have a clip, but Lillian, you were laughing at that last tweet. Why? He says 3 months to him, I think, is what he believes is sufficient.
I think it's a joke. And I remember Mukele recounting when he got into office. And if I recall, our team got into office on the 8th of November. Mm-hmm. And we hit the ground running with the boundaries. Remember, the first review had not been done. So we hit the ground running with that. 8th of November, we were there. And we started with the boundaries. We went, again, we had to go around the country and get views of the people. Then thereafter, the cases that were filed, the claims against the decisions we had made, which were then concluded in July of 2012. And after that, we started with the voter registration. So it was, 3 months surely? No way. It cannot be done in 3 months. And that's why the electoral commissioners must be in office at least 2 months before the election so that they can, get in. I mean, 2 years, sorry. 2 years before. 2 years. Yeah, 2 years before the election so that they can get into the processes and see how things work. But now that we are here at this point where we are looking at an election in August, they just must come in and do what they have to do. First things first. If the referendum comes, then they will handle the referendum. And if they have to do a quick training on the job, they'll have to do that. And thereafter, they prepare to handle the election. With all those processes that must be done constitutionally. Without forgetting the courts. It sounds like a David versus Goliath situation. And Vice Chair Gabriel, I'm coming to you shortly, but I want to show our viewers some pictures from some of the by-elections that have happened recently where we have seen scenes of chaotic scenes. Sometimes even counting has been interrupted. Let's play some of those pictures. We saw, and I think we aired some of those images live on this show last week from Juja. I'm not sure where this is, but we have picture. Oh, this is from Ruri Ward. This should be Nyandarua. This is what was witnessed on election day in a ward. We also, I know, also have some pictures from, I think, London ward. We saw some chaos there as well. Look at that, stones, and you name it. And unfortunately, this is what some people see when they hear elections in this country. And so, Gabriel, let me start with you on this one. And let's talk a bit about security. What should be, in your view, the working arrangement between the IEBC and the police? Because we did, for example, hear recently some of the IEBC commissioners stating that they'd like the police to inform them about security arrangements in an area. What should be those arrangements, in your view?
For practical purposes today, I'm sure my sister there would be able to say exactly what is happening. But otherwise, I'm moving a little bit behind or at my time. Security is a very, very important aspect in elections. Just as secrecy of the vote is also important. Now, of course, we know that the law says that even in terms of constituencies, if you are going to make changes in constituencies, they must be 12 months before the next election. Now, security is important, and I had to go to the Commissioner of Police many times in Nairobi to plead that they give us assistance. It comes to the question of financing the process. The police who are coming, they come and become, in my time, they became election officials. And then you will find that the commission doesn't have enough funds to bring them up. If they just come as policemen without extra payment, they don't feel happy because they know that the election officials are earning much more than what they are earning. But it is very important, right from even the commissioners themselves, down to their meetings, down to election officials, returning officers, everywhere, the police must be deeply involved. But the police also have a problem, because at that time, the political parties quarrel or fight one another. They may not be boxing one another, but they do quarrel. And they also need security in that area. So it is a question of the departments concerned, the financing, treasury, and the police force, just how much we have. It may reach a time when, if we are encouraged to have this National Youth Service, can be of some assistance to the process of having the elections secure. So these are things that I've got to carefully considered, but it is very important, security. Thank you.
Okay, and Lillian, on the back of that, who should make the call at a polling station whether the conduct of the election is orderly or not? Is it the presiding officer? Is it the commanding police officer? Who should make that final call?
The final call has to be made by the presiding officer. But let me go back to what happened during Mukele's time, because these are some of the recommendations that were made by Kriegler. Security is paramount. And the show of security in a polling station, like what we have seen, or rather what we saw last week, was quite appalling. And during Mukele's time, what used to happen, police were under the command of their own police structures. And that was changed in the Elections Act, that during elections, all police officers who are deployed to help during the electoral process have to report to IEBC. And this is why I say the person who should make the call is a presiding officer, because he is the person or she is the person in charge at the polling station and has to give instructions to that security officer, and it shouldn't be vice versa. So I think security is very critical, but I think that order of things must be maintained, that police should be under the command of the IEBC so that there are no double standards, there are no dual allegiances. They must report to the IEBC anything that is untoward, anything that is, you know, in the form of an electoral offense. They have to report to the IEBC. So their role must be always under the command of IEBC, and that is what the law was changed. So I think what we saw last week was not a good show at all, because it is quite scaring that we are going to go back to what we are trying to change, even when it comes to securing the polling stations, securing the polling materials. Remember, these are accountable documents, and they must be held in a secure way. Even the memes kits must be held in a secure way. Otherwise, how else would you retrieve the information that is held in those kits? So I think there is a lot to be done, and IEBC must be allowed. The people who are talking of confidence in the commission, I think they have a point, but only that we need to restore confidence in the commission, and we should, as citizens, trust that these are the people we have delegated our powers to conduct elections, and therefore the elections will be free and fair.
Vice Chair Mahiri Zaja, I think we're going to have to take that as your last word, and to you, Vice Chair Gabriel Mukele, as well. Let's wait for the selection panel, IEBC selection panel, to do their job, get those 4 Kenyans that will serve the country as IEBC commissioners. I think from sometime end of June or so, we should know that. A lot really needs to happen in a very short time. But these are conversations we will continue having here on Newsnight, because it is important we discuss the state of our election preparedness in 2021. Once again, thanks to my guests. We have had here in studio former Vice Chair of the IEBC, Lilian Mahiri Zaja, and former Vice Chairman of the Electoral Commission of Kenya, the ECK, Gabriel Mukele. Thank you to both of you for your time, and to our viewers who've sent in questions, comments as well on our SMS line 22422. The hashtag has been Newsnight. Asante Sana. On behalf of the whole team that's made this broadcast possible on this 25th day of May 2021, thank you so much for having tuned in, and we'll see you again soon. Have a good night and stay safe. Goodbye.